Thank you. Thanks.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
How's everyone doing? All right, we got a lot to talk about with, you know what, guys, I'm gonna change the chairs a little bit so we can see each other. Maybe John, you do that for, sorry, it's set decoration. All right, we got a lot to talk about, and I want to give you all a sense of kind of the flow so that you're in this with us, which is, obviously you're all gathered to talk about the future. But as we think about the future, we also want to take some measure of the current state. So we're going to do that, speaking about both, across three chapters, if you will. We're going to talk about the attention economy. We're going to talk about the media landscape broadly. And it seems appropriate, contextually appropriate, if you will, to end talking about out-of-home specifically. I would imagine you'd all agree with that. All right, so with that, let's talk a little bit about the state of attention. And as trite and cliche as it is to talk about the continued fragmentation of it, doesn't make it less true. As marketers, you all battle with the evolving state of or disruptions in attention on the regular, right? So what I'm wondering, and John, let's start with you and we'll work our way this way with the first question, is how are you, and then how do you think that marketers generally should be responding to where we are with despite the fact that the data's been debunked, I think metaphorically it still works, an attention span that is less than goldfish.
Yeah, no thanks. It's a huge challenge. I mean, I think this is a challenge that we've had for years and years. Marketers is the rise in digital. I think what we really think about is we look at our audience, who are we trying to focus on, and where are they, right? And where are they going to be? How can we get in front of them in the best way? So we at Therabody, we've done some things like we have started to go back on, we've gone back onto television in a big way. We have done a lot of things where we've experimented with completely turning off some channels and see if it actually is incremental to our business. We have a partnership with Resorts World, which, kind of talking where you all here today, where we have out-of-home placements changing almost every single week, depending on what the event is. So I think that there was such a swing into everything's digital, have to be there, and I think we've all seen that mediums are not great I don't believe they're great for building brands. I think there's sometimes can have some great benefits from a lower conversion perspective, but we're starting to look where the audiences we want to talk to and what are the great experiences we can do, and doing more and more stuff offline as well. With things like having our own stores and things like that, which is really important.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a little bit, so hold that thought. Maggie, how are you, and how do you think marketers generally should be responding?
Well, it's interesting, we talk a lot, and we could all get stressed and lament about, how fragmented it is and the attention economy. I really think about it from a place of creativity. It is not a reason to, not be able to have really good creative. That's what you have to start with, is the message, because people aren't paying attention. They're bombarded. And so that's really where we start to say we have to have creative that you cannot ignore, and then really build, the right channel plan from there. So it starts with a great brief and a great creative response.
I think you bring up a super important point, which is people's attention spans are not quite as short as we all consider. Their tolerance of bad content is best described as intolerance. But good content, we'll spend as much time with as the content asks of us. Marisa, what about you? How are you thinking about this?
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues, and I think it is about relevance. That's the hardest thing. For me, the noise that we face as consumers is analogous to the noise that we face as marketers. Where we're distracted by this kind of funny, I call it this purgatory place we are in the state of the industry, where a lot of things seem incredibly measurable, other things aren't, and it can lead us down these false garden paths of making choices that aren't actually necessarily the best ways to get attention, which is going back to the heart of your question. So for me, that's the biggest challenge for us in CMO roles, is being able to lead with confidence, knowing what you know as a marketer, that it is about great storytelling, that it is about thinking about, you know, how to use a combination of data and instincts to, and trust that you know how to tell a story in a really compelling way. And when I think across my career, not just in the theme park world, but at Lowe's and at Taco Bell and before that, I mean, the things that really got attention and broke through were because they were creatively disruptive, they were ideas, they were unexpected, they generated a lot of earned media, which is, I think, an important part of discussing media, is sort of like other people talking about it. So that is, in a sense, the holistic responsibility, turning out the noise both ways.
Yeah. I want to stick with metrics and measurements for a second. We were all talking about this last night, that I had done an interview with Kristen Cavallo, who just left as chair of Mullen Global, and she had said that data has robbed CMOs, marketers generally, of courage. I tend to be of the bias that she's right. I think we all are broadly. Nonetheless, we all have expectations to deliver proof of value of investment, if not always direct correlation to return on. As we think about, and Marisa, let me stick with you, as we think about where consumer attentions are and are going, current state, future state, what metrics, measures even, do you look at and pay attention to? And do you recommend that the audience consider?
Well, we were talking about this at dinner, as you said, and that quote, which I love, I also said that I would give a little reframe to it. In defense of CMOs, I actually think most of the CMOs I know really do have a lot of courage, and where the courage needs to exist is to empower CMOs to do what they do well and not be slaves to measurement that, as I said before, takes you down the wrong path. I think that's honestly one of the most stressful parts about it. So then what does matter? What do we try to measure? I mean, because the state of measurement is highly imperfect, just like, and probably always will be. We could talk about AI all day long. At the end of the day, we are all individual humans who make decisions in unconscious, complex, individualistic ways.
Speak for yourself.
Okay, I will. And you know, why you bought those shoes is like, you could not necessarily, most likely, identify it right down to one singular thing, but that's what, of course, we try to do.
I mean, just because they were a gift, so I
I was like, oh, I'm picking the wrong thing. As I did that, I had to
make decisions emotionally and then rationalize them.
And they're multifaceted, and there's a short tail and a long tail. So, I mean, I'm not telling a group of industry folks anything you don't know, but only to say that from this seat, it can be a very frustrating time, depending upon who are your colleagues in the C-suite or on your board, relative to the fact that you could really chase, especially in retail businesses, that bottom of the funnel, digital, like makes Google very happy, you know, paid click on the search ad or whatever, even, you know, lower funnel, paid social. And some of it is effective, but it goes back to, what are you trying to do?
Yeah, always.
You know, when I walked into this role, the very obvious observation for me with brands like SeaWorld, Busch Gardens, others was, sure, if you're already convinced, we should be hitting you with a message of a new sale or a new event, but what about all the people that still don't even know, aren't even thinking about it, or don't even know what it's about or why to go? That's not going to be solved at the bottom of the funnel.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, Les Binet, who wrote How Brands Grow, makes the point over and over and over again that growth comes from broad awareness and casual usage, which of course serves, I think, this room quite well.
Yes.
But before we get there, because we are going to get there again, Maggie, what do you listen to figure out where people are paying attention?
I co-sign everything that Marisa just said. Could not agree more that it is a series of things. So yes, we have to measure, we have to have data to be able to make informed decisions. But what we've done at United these last couple of years is really step back and say, okay, the planes are full. You all know, most of you probably flew on an airplane to get here. The airport is busy, the plane is full. My job is really, at the end of the day, have people feel good about United Airlines. If you live in New Jersey, you are a loyal United customer. Newark is your airport. But you might feel that you're handcuffed to the loyalty program. You have no other choice. I want you to pull up or tell your Uber taxi driver, take me to Terminal C at Newark Liberty International Airport, because you're so excited, to fly on United. And so if all of these moments of, pulling
Let's
data,
all have a moment of empathy for Maggie.
right? Thank you. It's hard, right? But all these moments together in data, really at the end of the day, that's the goal. That's what we're trying to measure. How do you feel about this brand? Because we know you're already buying a ticket with us, which is, I think, a bit different than maybe some of my my colleagues in other industries.
Yeah. John, you in answering the first question, talked about turning off certain channels in order to understand incrementality. What are you looking at, listening to?
Yeah, I think the challenge with us is, so Therabody started as a D2C brand, right? I mean, kind of with one product with Theragun. And so the whole team was so focused on short-term metrics, right? It was all about what's, today's hourly ROAS, right? The challenge is like, if we're trying to build an omni-channel business, right? We're also selling in Best Buy and Target and all over the place. Like, we can't have that just pure short-term thinking. So a lot of what we had to do is evolve. Those are important, like we said. You have to look at those. But as I saw a tweet, I think someone said yesterday, is like, most people are not looking to buy our products. Maybe flights is similar, but most people are like, I'm not thinking every day, am I going to buy a Theragun Mini, right? But now it's Mother's Day is approaching, and we want to just be top of mind when you're starting to think about, hey, I want to get something for mom, right? So I think that we're starting to see this shift. You mentioned, Les Binet and others that have started to do a lot of great research here. Back to your question, so we would do things like, and especially in certain markets, like, in Europe for us, we would just turn off Facebook, for weeks at a time. We'd turn off our Amazon, branded keywords, and we did not see a huge impact to the business. So it's allowed us basically to take a lot of the performance marketing, which at the end of the day, it's marketing, and just kind of reinvest it into more awareness media. And what we've seen is it's just really helped with all of our partners, right? It's not just our kind of that D2C focus, which we had to evolve away from. So we've just started to turn off a lot of digital things, right? A lot of partners who say, they're claiming attribution, Metas of the world and things like that. But really, we found that we have to question it, and you have to really check, and you have to try, and you can't just rely on these platforms to tell you that, hey, this is actually giving you incremental revenue.
Right. It's very smart. It's really interesting. All right, last question in this chapter 1. I would ask that, super quick answers, right? So top of mind, John, will stick with you. If we crystal ball it, right, if we're true to the theme and we're thinking about the future, where do you think consumer attention trends might take us over the next 2 to 3 years? And how do you think, what actions, in fact, do you think marketers might take as a result of that crystal ball?
Looking at the future is always hard. Maybe I'll say what I hope. I hope that, I think that people are going to look back on, especially the millennial generation, and they're going to say, I can't believe how much time you spent on your screens. I think it's going to be like, I can't believe you used to smoke or cars didn't have seatbelts. So what I'm hoping is, and I'm having a 2-year-old right now kind of going through this, I'm hoping that the next generations, and we're starting to see trends of like, I want to have a dumb cell phone, things like that. I hope we're going to see with a lot of things is swinging other ways, and that people are going to start to realize that a lot of stuff is not super beneficial to their, mental health. And so I'm hoping, we've seen people want to experience stuff, right? We see great things when people like, we engage with them during marathons or show up and, we have a partnership with United Airlines where we're like, having in-flight content or, things like, we're thinking all sorts of different ways that we can show up and have experiences that aren't just doom scrolling. So maybe it's not a prediction, but it's a hope and kind of giving faith in some of these generations who I think are going to start to react against it, because you always hate to do what your parents do, right? You always kind of want to reject it.
My kids idolize me.
I'm sure.
Maggie, we'll keep it going.
Yeah, let me double down on creativity. I think it's about creativity, content, storytelling. If you think about the Super Bowl and why everyone tunes in for the commercials during the Super Bowl, they want to be rewarded for that attention, and they know that brands are going to reward them. And so that is why they give you your attention, that one night of the year. We need more of that. It shouldn't just be, one night, one medium, but again, it comes back to the content.
I think it's going to be bifurcated. I wish, I'm the worst addict of my phone, so I probably have to follow that advice. But I think the bifurcation is that because of that, and we're going to continue to be very screen focused, that the other side is sort of really great, immersive, real world experiences. Now, maybe sadly that you then have bragging rights for showing those off on Instagram, so it all kind of comes back together. But I think, we're seeing that. I'm on an arts board, and that's like a big area of investment for us right now, because I think people crave real world experiences that are different, but it does still create a little bit of a vicious cycle back into social media.
It certainly does seem to. So let's switch now to the media landscape broadly. Maggie, and Marisa said a moment ago we could talk about AI all day long. Let's talk about it for a few minutes. And not just AI, but kind of the rise of virtual and augmented reality and new technologies and how they're influencing media. How do you think these technologies, not just media from a platform perspective or a discipline perspective, but again from the consumption of, and what do you think the impacts on out-of-home are specifically?
I mean, there's certainly a lot that we're doing with just the customer experience, but really when we think about how we're going to market the airline, my ask of everyone in this room is just to help us with the basics first. We need the brilliant basics, the foundation. How can we utilize these tools to make the work better? And so, we buy a ton of out-of-home at United. We own a lot in our terminals. Just even using, AI and VR to really help bring that experience to life. And so we're creating better ads. We still drive around. I had a woman on my team last week in Denver. She rented one of those like church minivans where people, go to a field trip in. And 10 people on my team drove around Denver for 3 hours, understanding the customer's journey and what message should go on which board. There's a lot that we could be doing with technology, so we don't have to physically go there. Sometimes there's no substitute for that. So before we even jump to the, what are the worlds we can create, I'm craving using that to build better work. And that's something that I know, we need a lot of help with, for sure.
Marisa, what's your take?
It's such a complicated question because you can go so many places with it. So I'm trying to think of how to put it into a soundbite. I think enabler is the right way to think about it. I'm on an industry board, and one of my fellow CMOs said, AI is not the answer. It's like having a good MBA student who kind of can get you there faster, but you still have to put it together. You still have to solve it. And I think that was sort of a good crystallizing way for me to think about where we are with that kind of technology today.
I think that's GAI in particular, right?
I think that is, yeah. Yeah, that's true. I mean, that was definitely a generative AI comment, not necessarily AR, VR, every other part of technology. But in a way, you could say it still comes back to that word of enabling. And if we can find ways to let it enable us to be better at our jobs, not do our jobs for it, not to replace judgment, intuition, creativity. I mean, I just fundamentally don't believe it can do that.
Yeah.
But it can get us maybe to answers, insights, like you were just describing, faster. And I think maybe the one other piece that we've been chasing for a while, and it's one of those love it, hate it buzzword, is personalization, customization. I mean, that's another one that you feel sort of tortured by, why isn't all my marketing personalized and customized? But, I think technology is going to make that it has made it a little easier, is going to continue to make that a little easier.
John, I want to switch gears a little bit with you, and you can include technology in this answer, but, or as you answer this question, as you think about cross-platform advertising and the importance of omnichannel strategies, what role do you see out-of-home specifically playing in that, and why?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's a great question because I think we're doing a number of different tests right now. Like I said, we have a Resorts World board through that partnership that we look at as a very awareness driving, right? And for CES, it said like, you're gonna walk 8 miles today or this week here at CES, kind of, and being very contextual to people that were there, similar with Super Bowl happening and to whole different events. But then we're also doing a pilot with Westfield Mall right now because we have a number of stores, and we're really looking at it to drive, footfall and traffic, and the kind of that more lower level, conversion. So I think it really depends, right? I think it depends on where the placements are, where's the audience, what are the communities that you're in, and I think it's about, I double down on what you said on creativity, right? It's about how do you use those spaces in creative ways, and how do you understand contextually where you are, and just to kind of a final point on AI, I think it's allowing at least our team to be able to do a lot of the stuff that, as you all know, marketers have to do is not very sexy, right? There's just a lot of assets that have to get made, that have to go kind of everywhere. You have Mother's Day, you have Father's Day, at least for us. We have Prime Day, we have so many things. I think it's allowing our team to start to automate some of those things, right? So that we can focus on the big things and the bigger creativity, the bigger ideas. And then also, as you all said, I mean, that to me, like if we're talking about measurement, that's what I always say, like to my team, like ideas are like a superpower, right? Like if you get a great idea and you break through, all the measurement will be there. Like it'll drive, the brand, it'll drive sales, it'll be an easy sell. So I do think that that's what AI is helping to enable us, so we can spend time on things like, great creative that can go in, a lot of these amazing spaces that we have with out of home.
Maggie, what role do you see out of home playing in your omnichannel approach?
It's mission critical, for sure. For us, it starts with the experience in and around the airport. And it's a really interesting debate that we've had. When I stepped into this role at United, I had to laugh. I got a lot of unsolicited feedback, and I think, okay, I never wander into the flight deck and say, let me give you my thoughts on how we should fly from LA to New York today. But I got a lot of feedback from people in one of two very different camps. Half the people said, why do we have all these ads in our airports? People have already bought the ticket. They're here. Shouldn't we be spending that money and that time elsewhere? And then I've, have the other camp where people say we should double down on that. Who is a better person to look at our advertising than someone that's sitting at a gate for 20 minutes just waiting to board their flight? And so I think what we've done is find really what's the right message for that moment. 3 or 4 years ago, if you were walking through a United terminal, you would, and this is not to pick on our friends at the PGA Tour, but you would have seen a lot of ads about how we're the official airline of the PGA Tour. Is that the right message that you need to see when you're seated at gate B26? No, not at all. That's a message that we can target digitally to golf fans, United customers. There's a lot we can educate you at the gate in the airport. And so we've really thought about, how can out of home be a tool to make the airport feel less chaotic. There's a lot of signage. How can we pull some of that messaging into out of home so there's just less stuff when you walk through the airport?
It's really interesting to think about using that owned out of home media, as a way of reaching those who've already bought with an eye towards their next purchase.
Exactly.
And as you said in the beginning, how you make them feel about sitting at B26.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not going to complain. I want to build off that, and Marisa, let's start with you, and then John, go back to you, which is you all own, as Maggie was just discussing, retail is out of home, right? And retail, I don't mean retail media in the context that we're all talking about it as an industry, but your stores, your parks, the airplanes, the airports. How Marisa, are you using these owned assets within your own business?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about that question, I think more going back to like my Taco Bell days, where we had 7,000 restaurants. That really is like having 7,000 billboards. And it was really interesting because just like Maggie said, I mean, there was such a sort of conventional wisdom about what needed to be on those windows, what didn't. And until we had the courage to experiment and actually take them down and see the different, and then learn differently about how to use that and what the point of that, signage, if you will, was in the journey. That's when we were actually were creatively liberated. Being in a theme park industry now, I think the out-of-home piece is actually really important. Very much the same thing, opinionated colleagues, but and this preceded my tenure there, but I think we got out of a lot of it probably in the COVID era, and then it was like, everyone's like, why do I not feel us in the market anymore? And that was very much correlated to having lost our out-of-home positions. Conversely, this is one really quick story if I can. Someone who used to work for me at Lowe's got out of the airport in Orlando, and we had this big, beautiful, SeaWorld billboard, right, going down the escalator, and her little son, and they had been going to Disney, and her little son was like, I want to go there, and they tacked on a day. So now, the great thing about that is that was like a true back to the how do we make decisions, right? That anecdote was like, look at the power of out of home, look at what that did. That literally just drove a visit. If we could just bottle that up or multiply it and be able to have that sense of, no, it actually caused that behavior, it would of course make all of our jobs, all of your jobs, a lot easier to sell. It's of course not really that way, but it is necessary, I think, part of how to really get people thinking in a local and regional environment.
We've got just over 3.5 minutes left, so I have 2 questions that I want to make sure we get to, but John, I want to give you a chance to answer. I know your retail footprint doesn't have the scale of Taco Bell at this point, certainly. How do you think about retail as media?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hugely important. How are you using those store spaces? How are you bringing customers in? How are you having the best experience of the brand? And then what can you surround it with? I love, one of my favorite billboards is what sits on top of Yeti's office in Austin, right? And they use that all the time to just do fun, playful things, post it on social, and again, it connects right with their store. And so yeah, we don't have the biggest footprint, but when we were at Apple, when I was at Apple, it was we would just the attention to the hoarding we would put up before a store open, right? And we would think about every single thing we can do and how do we make that a great experience for the customer, because like you said, it is a billboard. Okay,
sticking with you, asking you guys to be super quick. You've all brought up the importance of creativity. We've all seen the rise of out-of-home spectaculars, some of them artificial, like eyelashes on trains, but from Barbie to Gucci to whatever. What do you all think the future of out-of-home creative is beyond its traditional efficacy as, an awareness reminder, localization medium? John?
I think just the power of immersive experiences, right? I mean, I think some of these screens you're seeing, the creativity that's coming out of it, the really ability to stop people in their tracks and to tell some amazing stories and capture attention. I mean, I'm just amazed by it, wowed by it, some of the reels I was seeing before we started. So I think just really pulling you into very immersive experiences, and then can you have a continued journey after that? I'm not one to believe it's all going to be tomorrow, AR, VR. I think it's still going to be tied to those mediums, and people aren't going to just be holding phones and things. So I think there's a great opportunity to just focus on making those really great, amazing.
Marisa, super quickly, same question.
Yeah, I'll keep it simple. I agree. I think and it may not be all because sometimes it'll be because it's spectacular. Sometimes it might be just something super simple like an Apple ad, but just the creativity just stops you, and that's powerful too. But I think it is about leveraging the best of the medium for the message.
Maggie?
Yeah, I'll say contextual relevancy. I think there are awesome examples, what the industry is doing, what some of our brands have done, but I feel collectively we've probably only scratched the surface of just how fast we can move when it comes to being contextually relevant and really what we could put an ad on. I think, we've only scratched the surface, so I'm super excited about that.
Last question, though I do want to reinforce, Marisa talked about personalization before. As an industry, we're spending a lot of time talking about personalization and too little time talking about relevancy. Just because it says Dear Seth at the top doesn't make it relevant. Right. So I want to ask you all to give a piece of advice to this room, the leaders of the industry, and what they need to do to better serve your needs. Maggie first.
Yeah, I would say don't be afraid, to share your insights back with us. We put out some really bad out of home at United a couple of years ago, and many of you in this room probably saw it come across your desk. I didn't get a single phone call or email saying, are you sure this is what you guys want to go out with? There's a lot of words in this, or the images are going to be conflicting with one another. And so we're really open to that two-way dialogue and that feedback. We depend on the insights that you sit on top of every single day. Stop a piece of work from going out, because the last thing I want to see driving down the highway is something where I'm like, oh, you can't read that, and it is too many words.
It is stunning to me how many people kind of just miss that obvious point, the brilliant basic. John, super quickly.
Yeah, I think to your point, don't get hung up in personalization. Like, this medium is all about the masses and the things we can do, and there's more commonality with people than not. If you're creative, you're contextual, that's what's gonna be important. Don't get caught in this hyper-personalization trap. I don't believe it.
Marisa, the last word to you.
My one word for all of you and advice would be empathy. Empathy for your clients. Understand some of the things we talked about and what it is to be sitting in this chair with the complexity of these decisions and forces that may not serve your interests, that may be going against an investment in out of home, for example. So think like a partner in terms of how you would best truly sell these things in ways that can create both short and long-term value.
Marisa Thalberg, Maggie Schmerin, John Solomon, thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.